Alright, so this is a request that was way up there on the request list, and it was kind of getting lost to time, so I thought I'd pop up there, take a look, and pick something out of there, and I picked this. This was requested by Tol E.M. Liu, and is Sacred Cow Shipyards. Imagine my disappointment that Space Hulk did not refer to large green organisms floating in space. Now, that's a mouthful of a title, but it's about Space Hulks in 40K. So, Space Hulks in 40K, if nobody knows what they are, is when ships go into the warp, sometimes they get lost. Well, these ships fly around in the warp and eventually start crashing into each other. Eventually, what winds up happening is it re-enters real space, and sometimes it'll re-enter real space and then go back into the warp, and it'll appear in different locations at different times, and it can actually be predicted if they have enough information on a particular Space Hulk. Space Hulks, even by 40K standards of ships, are gargantuan. Because you're talking... A Space Hulk could have been around before have been forming before the Great Crusade ever happened. It'll have human ships. It'll have Xenos vessels. It'll have everything that you can imagine. It's also if you're boarding a Space Hulk, you can expect to find problems. And they're usually in one of three varieties. You have Orc problems, you have Tyranid problems, or you have Chaos problems. One of the three is going to be on that ship. But this is him. This is his video on Space Hulks. I don't know how you'd even begin to quantify this, but we're going to take a look at it. Here we go.
Is safe from being taken down to its nuts and bolts.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me rewind that because it got a little bit further than I wanted to.
Welcome to Sacred Cow Shipyards, where no ship is safe from being taken down to its nuts and bolts.
Here we go.
You know the really weird thing to me about the whole Warhammer 40,000 universe thing going on?
Let's go.
It's not the fact that the leader of the humans is this dead, not dead, functionally demigod organism that consumes literal thousands of souls every day just to stay not quite dead and keep the lights on in a f***ing lighthouse. No, it's not that. It's not that there is literally an entire species whose concept of extracting themselves from a planet boils down to all of the organisms jump into vats of acid their protoplasm is like shot up into space and gets reformed into other things, because that's not nightmarish at all.
Tyranids.
It's not the fact that you f***ing primates and your various alien analog species have somehow managed to build bipedal walking combat robots that are over 500 of your feet tall. And for some reason, y'all thought this was a good idea because, you know, the bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical thing is like one of the least stable combat forms in the entire universe. But hey, big walking robots, am I right? It's not even that you goddamn squishies for some reason build these combat war machine things with projectile weapons that are the size of your houses and somehow have enough space to...
Houses that small?
...store multiple rounds in these combat vehicles. The big ones, the small ones, whatever. They shoot these ginormous rounds that they seem to have a limitless supply of. Did y'all create fucking pocket universes or something and shove the bullets in there or something? I have no idea. I mean, in fairness, there actually was a halfway not horrible movie.
Most of the weapons that Titans employ are going to be energy-based, taking advantage of the reactors inside the Titan. The smaller Titans mostly are going to have ammunition-based weaponry, but that's going to be few and far between compared to energy weapons.
If you're into that kind of B-schlock stuff that use this flat space concept to hide everything from cartridges to swords. So maybe Warhammer 40,000 has something similar. I don't know. Like I said in a previous episode, I am not actually that versed in the Warhammer 40,000 universe mythos, so I'm just winging it. And that's probably obvious to all of you actual Warhammer 40,000 universe geeks out there who are all like, oh yeah, those are totally not the scariest or horriblest or weirdest things in the 40,000 universe.
Not even close.
I don't know what he's talking about. He's just picking low-hanging fruit. And it's true. And honestly, what I'm about to tell you probably will not surprise or impress you either, but you're not really the audience of this channel, so I guess you're just going to have to deal with that. I'm sorry.
I will.
Anywho, as myself, as the dockmaster of the Sacred Cow Shipyards, the thing that stands out to me as just plain f***ing weird are space hulks. No, amusingly enough, I'm not actually talking about large green organisms floating in space for some reason, although I guess some of the Warhammer
There are large green organisms that float through space, and they're called orcs.
40k space hulks might actually be green. I don't know, maybe, who knows. All kinds of things happen in that universe. I don't know. I'm talking about the weird agglomeration of ships and detritus and junk and who knows what else that come together in this massive lump of just crap and apparently coast through the warp under some sort of tidal effect and occasionally pop out of warp and then occasionally pop back into warp. And it's all very random. It's all very strange. These things are not organic looking because they're made out of pieces of ships and whole ships and asteroids and rocks and I don't even know what else.
Yeah.
But it is just plain.
The reason it's like it is because it gets crushed together by the reality altering methods of the warp. So you could be walking down an Eldar passageway on one of their ships and then find yourself in the middle of, I was going to say an orc ship, but it would be anything.
Random. And honestly, the way Space Hulks came about to be does not surprise me in the slightest bit. If you pay even the slightest bit of attention to a body of water or the vacuum of space or anything even remotely similar, you will notice that junk tends to attract junk. It just happens. There's probably some scientific explanation for it. I don't know it. But the fact is, if you take a body of water and you pour a whole pile of junk in it and you distribute that junk evenly across the entire body of water, eventually all that junk's going to be in one big lump. Don't ask me why, don't ask me how, it just happens.
The plastic island in the Pacific.
Happens. Now, in terms of the Space Hulks, some of these things are actually big enough to have their own gravitational fields.
Yes.
So not only is there just weirdness going on where junk attracts junk, but in their case, literally junk literally attracts junk through gravitation. So that aspect doesn't surprise me. It's not the fact that Space Hulks exist, because we've got, 8, 9, 10 more species plying the f***ing warp and putting their ships in weird-ass places and doing weird-ass things with them and losing them and and having them destroyed or shot out from underneath them or just disappearing or stuff. And all that stuff's going to come back up somewhere. And apparently the warp is more than happy to suck all that stuff up, smash it all together, reform it into this utter monstrosity, fill it with all kinds of nightmares, and just toss it back out into real space periodically and then suck it back up again, because who's going to stop it?
This happens.
It's the warp. It's kind of, look at the other episode about how much f***ed up the warp is. But that's kind of the point. These things are literal nightmare vessels. These things are just Escher-esque, not adhering to the Newtonian concept of physics or space or anything, disasters just floating on the drift. They get sucked in and out of the warp and carry all kinds of badness on board them. And hey, you want to know what the Imperium does? They fucking explore them. And I guess you kind of have to understand that the Imperium's in kind of this weird situation where they don't understand like most of the technology they use, but they can reproduce some of it. And then there's a significant chunk of technology that they neither understand nor can reproduce. So that technology eventually wears out and breaks, and they...
One of the main reasons that they will board a Space Hulk is because of the off chance, and even if it's a small one, even if it's absolutely small, minuscule chance, that the boarding of that Space Hulk will result in the recovery of a standard template construct. Now, STC, standard template constructs, are beyond value. Like, at a level beyond actual value. If you were to find an STC in the 40K universe, you would be... There is not enough that the Mechanicus and the Imperium at large wouldn't give you for it, because of just how powerful pieces of tech they are. An STC will allow you to basically build a machine that will build something. And there was a group, and I can't remember the exact story, but they found a STC that made knives, and every single person in that group was given a wealthy planet to govern. They were just given it to it is yours and your family's in perpetuity now, because you found this, and the thing made knives. So, technology, the Imperium is scared of technology, and for good reason. But that fear of technology, it now borders on when the Mechanicus was founded. Not founded, but when the Mechanicus really right now is what's holding humanity really back, because humanity, for the most part, has forgotten how to advance itself. They've completely forgotten. And that's one of the hardest things to explain to people when you're trying to explain 40K to them. Humanity has in many ways forgotten how to do half of the things that we take for granted today. Like, we have inventors and stuff like that, but humanity has gone far beyond that point. It is now an existence based purely on survival.
Can't make new ones, and that's kind of complicated. So these Space Hulk things are basically warp-enabled time capsules, in that some of the vessels at the cores of these Space Hulks have been around for literally thousands of years, and
If
have
not tens
fresh...
of thousands.
I guess fresh isn't the right word. They have untouched examples of the technology that the Imperium can no longer understand or reproduce. And if the Imperium can recover those pieces of technology, maybe things will get better, even though the grim dark future of Warhammer 40,000 pretty much eliminates anything ever getting better, ever. That's not the point. The point is that the Imperium believes that if they can get on board these Space Hulks and liberate the technology, that things might get better. I mean, they're wrong, but they believe this, and frankly, the Imperium is mostly run on belief, so sure, why not? Well, the why not basically boils down to a lot of these Space Hulks are actually deliberately used as transport vehicles by the Chaos Marines, by the Orcs, and by the Tyranids, to name three significant factions that hate the Imperium and would rather it died.
The Orcs don't care. The Tyranids don't care. Chaos, on the other hand, they care.
There's also demons and various other things piggybacking on these Space Hulks, because why not? These things blip in and out of the warp, so they're going to get infected by everything that exists and doesn't exist in the Immaterium. So yeah, wow, there is a lot of bad shit on Space Hulks.
Yeah.
In fact, there is so much bad shit on Space Hulks that exploring and clearing them are reserved for Terminators only. And for clarification, I am not talking about the time-traveling, human mother-assassinating robots.
I'll let him see if I can fill in the gaps for people that are coming in from outside the channel that don't know that much about 40K.
This is where we get into another weird aspect of the Warhammer 40K universe, where basically your leaders are just bigger than everyone else. Apparently the Emperor is just f***ing enormous, which is weird, because apparently...
Technically, no. Nobody knows how truly big or small that the Emperor actually is. No one knows this.
Actually, humans have an upper limit on how big they can get, but they cheated around the edges, so we'll just ignore that for the moment. So you basically start with the Imperial Guard, who are literally Mark 1 Mod 0 humans. They are grist for the massive, blood-filled carrion mills that occupy the entire Warhammer 40,000 universe. They're just normal human beings who happen to be armed with very powerful flashlights. It's very unfortunate. When you move up from there, you get to the actual Space Marines. Now, actual Space Marines are kind of special and different. They get chosen at an early age, I think pre-puberty or whatever it is you humies call it, and they get augmented along the way. There's gene splicing, there's organ transplanting, there's biomechanical implants, there's all kinds of weird stuff going on. And they end up being kind of big, kind of strong, and outfitted in, I guess it's technically power armor, although it's not very powerful armor in relation to other things. And the...
Gotta correct him on that one. Space Marine power armor is designed and it directly interfaces with the person inside of it. There is a plethora of implants that a Space Marine will get that enhances their mental facilities and their physical abilities. If you took 100 Space Marines in power armor with today's military, we'd have to drop. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. We'd probably have to wind up dropping a nuke on them in order to stop them. And 1,000 Space Marines, a chapter of Space Marines, which is 1,000 Space Marines, if you guys didn't know. 1,000 Space Marines would be overkill at a level that just beggars belief against today's military, just because of their level of organization and how good they are at fighting. 100 Space Marines can conquer a planet.
Other things is what we're getting to. There's the Space Marines and their Space Marine armor. They are the backbone of the Imperium. They're the ones that everyone hears of when you hear about Space Marines. And then there are the Terminators. Terminators are Space Marines, yes, technically, but they are in no shit power armor.
Yes.
This is the kind of armor that could not only withstand a close proximity nuclear blast, but it could also just like rip apart the housing of a nuclear reactor with its own robotic hands. And these are the kind of suits that are necessary to explore, examine, and recover material from a Space Hulk.
Now, Terminator armor in and of itself, back before an event called the Horus Heresy, all Space Marines were going to wind up in what was considered Terminator armor. All Space Marines were eventually going to wind up in that. Until the event called the Horus Heresy happened, and there was a specific amount of battles that showed the weaknesses of Terminator armor as it related to regular Space Marines. A regular Space Marine in that armor that you're seeing with the Marine over it, that's just tactical armor. Space Marine tactical armor is ridiculous by any metric that you could consider. If you compared it to Halo 2's Mjolnir armor, if you compared it to any other suit, it would be it's batshit insanity, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Terminator armor, on the other hand, is on another level from that in and of itself. And, Terminator armor, if Terminator armor is employed, they're looking to really fuck some shit up. It turns the Space Marine into a literal... It turns the Space Marine from a walking tank to a walking fortress.
And Terminator suits, by the way, are one of those pieces of technology that the Imperium not only does not understand, but cannot reproduce.
They can reproduce them. They can reproduce Terminator plate. There are some patterns of Terminator armor that they can't replace right now because they simply don't have the technology for them. But Terminator plate can be done. The problem is twofold. One is the mechanicus I was talking about earlier that prevents a lot of progress. they refuse to allow certain things to be widely distributed. The second is the quality of materials that goes inside a Terminator plate is second to absolutely nothing. They will not allow a suit of Terminator armor to be made if the materials aren't the absolute 100% best. And there is a piece in every single piece of Terminator armor, there is a shard of the Emperor's own armor, the God Emperor of Mankind's own armor that he wore during the Great Crusade, supposedly inside the Terminator plate itself. Whether that's true or not, that's up to interpretation.
So, yes, let's go ahead and throw these guys into a meat grinder when we can't replace the suits that they're wearing in order to recover maybe some technology that we couldn't make otherwise. Or this stupid thing will blink back into the warp and take all of them with it, and all of those Terminators will be exposed to literal centuries of torture and torment at the hands of the demons who live in the warp.
Which
because
happens.
that makes perfect sense. I mean, the part that I really don't understand about this whole thing is that the Imperium literally has the technology to atomize planets. It's called the exterminatus. I don't know, weird Latin-esque word.
There are several flavors of exterminatus. This right here is just orbital bombardment. There is cyclonic torpedoes, two-stage cyclonic torpedoes, exterminatus by the form of virus bombs. There is exterminatus by good old fashioned, cracking a planet's crust and then firing a whole bunch of weapons into the center of it. The one that everybody's kind of familiar with is the one that's on the screen right now, which is flat out orbital striking. Now, a two-stage cyclonic torpedo is another level entirely. That's the Emperor's middle finger.
But they reserve that nonsense for heretical planets, planets that turn their back on the Emperor, whatever, instead of, using it for actual threats to the Imperium.
They do. When an exterminatus is called for, it's usually the absolute last resort. It's usually the last option for them to do, because if they hit a planet with this, there's no getting that planet back. The Imperium can afford to play the long game. They really, really can, and they know it too. And everybody else in the galaxy does too. The only people that could have afforded to play a longer game were the Eldar, but they screwed that up spectacularly. If the Imperium deems a world to be cleansed of life, they're doing it as a last resort. Or they're doing it because they're doing it to deny a massive strategic advantage. Kripman, when he popped an entire sector of planets, he did it to deny the Tyranids biomatter to continue to wage war against the Imperium. He essentially tried to starve them out. And then he promptly led them into an Orc Empire, which was amazing.
Like literal massive flying fortresses that are full of Tyranids and Chaos Marines, and they don't even know what else. They can deposit them wherever they end up whenever they pop out of the warp. Oh no! Instead of just blessed nuking this thing repeatedly until it just vanishes, they're going to send like individual people in these happy little spacesuits on board this stupid thing to figure out what's on board it. And then those stupid little people get torn apart and get turned into more flesh that the Tyranids or the Chaos Marines or whoever the hell else get to play with. Yeah. I mean, it's obvious how much the Imperium does not care about individual human life.
They really don't.
I mean, I have a hard time caring about individual human life my own self, because, I mean, y'all squishies are just, not very durable. But wow, that's just a special level of, like, you don't matter, so go away and die. And worse than that, the tech you're wearing doesn't matter. The irreplaceable tech you're wearing doesn't matter in the quest of maybe, possibly, probably not finding better tech. Yeah, it's a good thing the Imperium is a cult. And that's all from Sacred Cow Shipyards. Please be advised that any ship left on the dock for more than 24 hours will be compressed to a cube.
There's actually an extremely good reason why Hulks are boarded. and it's the STCs that I was talking about before. Um, one STC, one STC that would be able to build Warhound Titans would, if the Mechanicus would allow it to function, would essentially revolutionize and change everything. STCs that did creature comforts would revolutionize and change everything. In fact, the Imperium is one STC away from, everything. And that's why the Imperium is willing to risk so much to regain them. In any case, I love hearing people talk about 40k stuff when they don't know that much about it, because then you get to see the absolute, incredulity they have when they're dealing with this stuff. And it's hilarious. And it's great. And I love it. So that was Sacred Cow Shipyards on on Space Hulks. He couldn't go into specifics because there are no specifics for a Space Hulk. They could be 30 orc ships and a little yacht that some town watercast had out. It really does border that much. It really does go that far into what kind of variety you could see. It really just depends on what crashed into itself in the warp. In any case, like and subscribe if you guys haven't already. I have a Discord down below. Join up with that and see if you would like to see if you see. This is what happens. My brain just shuts off, and then I can't think anymore. I'm gonna go ahead and close it there. I'll catch you guys next time.